Right, so while the media are bleating on the news channels that this Christmas should be fine as long as we don't get sick, want to post anything, or go anywhere at all as a one-sided swipe at the trade unions and the strike action going on, echoing the calls of a government they should be holding to account, but where the wealthy who control both the media and fund the governing party are the ones clearly calling the shots. And more people are voting in favour of strike action. All the while, the government seems more intent than ever to dig its heels in, acting as if they're involved in some kind of a war. But the people they're fighting are just ordinary working-class people wanting enough to live on and deliver safe, secure services both for themselves and for us. Posties, railway workers, the Met Office, the fire brigade, civil servants, border force, bus drivers, nurses, paramedics, breweries, Heathrow staff, Eurostar guards, teachers, driving examiners. The list keeps on climbing, with over 1 million workers set to strike throughout December. They don't want to do it. They lose pay by doing it. This is the last thing anyone wants to do in the run-up to Christmas. But it does seem that the government is actively driving this problem. They want to swing public opinion back in their favour and feel if they can keep this inconvenience going for the rest of us, we'll soon turn on the unions. We cannot do that. It'll be us and our rights at work they'll come for next if they win here. And if you think I'm exaggerating that claim that the government are to blame, then watch this clip from a session of the Transport Secretary Mark Harper getting questioned at committee.
You can't claim you didn't see the splash on Monday in the Daily Telegraph claiming Number 10 at the last minute has added driver-only trains as an issue to this dispute. Was that report incorrect?
Well, I was specifically talking, Mr Morris asked me a question about a report today, which I haven't seen.
It was on Monday.
On the general
The
point,
Secretary of State, did you not see this report, and is it true?
No, I've been very clear that we've. I was asked to facilitate a new offer.
Driver-only trains being introduced by the Number 10 or the Treasury at the last minute. It wasn't on the table before.
On reform, we're very clear.
No, answer the question.
We're very clear. We need to see reform.
The question.
On the specifics about detailed negotiations are taking place between employers and trade unions. It's not the government's role to micromanage the detail of the reform. But we've been clear that we do need to see workforce
operators
reform.
And the unions both say that this issue has been inserted in the last week by Number 10 or the Treasury, which has scuppered a deal that was on the table.
Well,
that is what both the train operators and the unions
just
have told
on that
us.
point about scuppering a deal, when that was already on the table, when I met Mr Lynch, he made it very clear to me that he hadn't had an offer on the train operating side of the house. There had been an offer on Network Rail. I met with the trade unions. I was asked to facilitate an improvement. We then saw...
That wasn't my question. You're not answering the question.
I am telling you what's been going on.
A report in the Tory Graph on Monday, the paper that backs this government above all others, said that ministers had added on at the last minute to their deal presented to the RMT driver-only train services, as dangerous to commuters and discriminatory to passengers requiring assistance as that is. They've tried to push this through in the past. They were defeated by the unions then, and they need to be defeated again now because of the risks to passenger safety should anything happen to the driver. And Mark Harper was backed into a corner on this by Ben Bradshaw. Far be it from me to praise a Blairite like him, but he was right to do so here because all he wanted to know was the report in the Tory Graph true? And the obvious answer from Harper should have been no, if a deal was really what they wanted. Instead, he dodged the question repeatedly, looked ever more uncomfortable and ever more guilty, even claiming it is not the government's job to micromanage the details, despite it very much being the government's job to micromanage the details. The rail delivery group cannot negotiate anything without government sign-off, and it's been that way since the government took a public stake in the rail system to keep it going during the pandemic. The government decide what can be offered and what can't. The RDG just act as middlemen, essentially, powerless in and of themselves, just opening their mouths and letting the words of transport ministers and the Treasury come pouring out. There will be no revised deal either, the RMT have just announced, so the strikes will continue. The government have scuppered the rail deal. No denial they are doing that. Refuse to make a new offer either, but their media cheerleaders will still seek to undermine the unions rather than government refusal to negotiate, as GMB showed again this morning by letting hard-right hack Quentin Letts gob off again.
Some of them are taking days off around Christmas, aren't they? Make the Christmas holiday a bit longer for them, of course. There's a headline on the...
We don't pay, Quentin.
What?
They sacrifice pay, of course, when they go on strike.
They do, so they're obviously not as badly off as, say, people were in 1926.
making the Christmas holiday longer for themselves. And when the point is made to Letts that they are doing so without pay, he simply snarks that they can clearly afford to then. And clearly they aren't as hard up as, say, they were in 1926 when the UK last had a general strike, something we seem to be having just now in all but name. Here's the thing, Quentin. Since 1926, the pound has lost 99% of its value, and prices today are 72 times higher than they were back then. British people are functionally much poorer now than they were then, poorer than they've ever been in living memory. And with far weaker trade unions, thanks to the anti-trade union laws passed by previous Tory governments, which the red Tory governments of Blair, followed by Brown, refused to repeal. Still, those laws aren't weak enough, though, not to this ultra-right-wing mandateless Tory administration. So what else are they doing to keep inciting further conflict over pay, terms and conditions, and their determination to make life worse for so many of us? Well, legislation, of course. The Transport Strikes Minimum Services Bill is on the horizon, and this seeks to make unions break their own strikes. They literally force the unions to name the people that will be allowed to break their own picket lines in order to ensure a minimum service level. There's some seriously poor laws in this country, but this is literally forcing unions to cut off their noses to spite their faces. There is also talk of banning the emergency services from being able to strike completely. So that'll be just brilliant. Work paramedics, nurses, firefighters and more to work until they literally drop because they can't speak out or withdraw their own labour. But what they absolutely will do is quit, leaving even more job shortages than there already are. A job that isn't pay enough to live on isn't a job that will get done. Meanwhile, in the short term, the government are once again abusing our armed forces, who are already banned by law from taking strike action, to be the scabs crossing the picket lines to fill the service roles, whether they want to or not. The Tories have done this before, over and over. Every time things get a little bit tricky for them. Underinvestment in flood defences, send the army in to mop up. Border force going on strike, send the army in. No ambulance drivers, well, we'll send the army in. Firefighter shortage, I know, let's send the army in. Will it be MASH units in hospital car parks next? The Navy doing their best impression of Postman Pat? Even armed forces bosses are yelling at the government because, yet again, their intransigence means soldiers and the like are being deployed to roles they shouldn't have to fill. And when an army private is only on 22k a year themselves and their pay hasn't kept up with inflation just like everyone else's, you can't help but feel their solidarity is actually with the workers. And actually they themselves could easily turn the tide of this. They may not be able to legally strike, but they could refuse to do jobs outside of their remit. And who's going to stop them if they did? No amount of Tories saying it's what Putin would wash when you're taking armed personnel away from their primary roles to deliver post or drive ambulances. The unions are on their own, aside from those of us showing solidarity with them. There's no support from Starmer's husk of a Tory-like Labour Party, and the Tories themselves are actively driving these disputes to last longer instead of seeking to bring them to an end, engineering the inconvenience it's causing, yet blaming the workers for it. The government is hell-bent on crushing these people, which is why we, the public, need to stand firm with all workers taking strike action, because it's them today, but it'll be us tomorrow if the Tories win. Pay people a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. Nobody argues against that mantra, and deliver safe services or hand them back to us through rich nationalisation. But don't, for heaven's sake, pay any attention to snide mainstream mouthpieces or blustering Tory ministers. We've all had enough of being poor. We need to take this fight to those intent on keeping us that way. Back the unions, fuck the Tories.
Yeah, fuck the Tories.
That's it. Wash your mouth out.
Sorry.